Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to have such a large audience and a very diverse audience. I can see we have folks from North Carolina, Salt Lake City, Florida, all over the Northeast. And it looks like we have teachers and art curators and folks who are tuning in from all sorts of backgrounds and interests. So thank you all for being here. I'm just going to quickly introduce the Catskill Science Collaborative and then introduce our speakers this evening. And I'm just seeing now the poll results come in as well. So we are about split. Our audience is about half are attending a Carey event for the first time, and just over half have done that before. And most people have not heard of the Catskill Science Collaborative, so I'll be happy to introduce that in a second. And it looks like our favorite Hudson River School artist is Thomas Cole. And perhaps maybe some that we know less about are Asher Durand. So maybe we'll learn some more about some new artists, and we'll see if our favorites change at all. But without further ado, let me just introduce the Catskill Science Collaborative. Like Lori mentioned, I'm the coordinator for this program. We are a group of individuals and institutions dedicated to facilitating collaboration and communication with those doing environmental research in the Catskills. We're funded by New York State through the Environmental Protection Fund, with support from New York City Department of Environmental Protection and private donors. In general, we help implement the goals of the Catskill Environmental Research and Monitoring Group, and we are coordinated or housed within the Carey Institute of Ecosystem Studies. One of our goals is to provide opportunities for a broader audience to learn about research and environmental issues in the Catskills. So that is sort of the origin of this event tonight. And it is my pleasure to introduce Robert and Johanna Titus. They are journalists, authors, geologists, and longtime residents in the Hudson Valley and the Catskills. They've published several books that we'll hear about tonight, including The Catskills in the Ice Age. And they have presented all over the Hudson Valley and the Catskills, and worked with many organizations, including the Columbia Land Conservancy and the Mountaintop Historic Society. But they truly are experts on this topic, and especially bringing two fields together through a scientific perspective and an art perspective. So we're fortunate to be able to hear from them tonight. And without further ado, I will hand it over to them, and I'll sign back on at the end to go through some questions with the audience. Thank you.
And thank you. And thanks to the Carey Institute for inviting us. Let me get my screen shared for you. There we go.
There we go.
Now we're cooking with gas. Well, as you heard, we were academics. We are now retired, and we've written several books.
4
So
far. We're working on 2 more.
And we write regular columns for several publications in the Catskills and Greater Hudson Valley. And we write mostly about the geology of the region and how the geology influenced the culture of the Catskills and, of course, the Greater Hudson Valley. So our talk today concentrates on how the geologic processes of the Wisconsin glaciation, more commonly known as the last ice age, shaped the landscapes and defined really the first art movement in America, the Hudson River School of Art. Thomas Cole, the movement's heart, was the portrayal of what was called the sublime, a term that was overused then and perhaps even now, much as the terms issue and iconic are overused today. It came to mean a wild, somewhat untamed wilderness, something that was new and unknown, exciting, and also a bit frightening. The Hudson River School of Art began with this man, Thomas Cole, whose first trip to the Catskills produced Lake with Dead Trees in 1825. The place is today what is known as North-South Lake Campground in Hunter, New York, a place that has become one of the most visited state parks in New York. Among those joining Cole in portraying landscapes of the Catskills were Asher Brown Duran. Unfortunately, Thomas Cole died at the young age of 48. Asher Brown Duran, a fellow painter, expressed his grief by painting Cole with William Cullen Bryant, who wrote and delivered the oration at his funeral. He painted them into a composite Catskills background, a sort of summary of the sublime, known as Kindred Spirits. This painting was owned by the New York Library, but hung on loan in the Metropolitan Museum's American Wing for years, where I visited it on many a Sunday morning, until it was sold, and now is on exhibit at an art museum in Arkansas. The most successful member of the Hudson River School of Art was Thomas Cole's former and only student, Fredrick Church. This is Niagara Falls from the American side, from 1867. Not only did Church paint several versions of Niagara Falls, he worked with such notables as Frederick Law Olmsted, Calvert Vaux, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Longfellow, Henry James, William Morris, and even Charles Darwin to save the wild view of the falls. Finally, in 1883, after a dozen years of effort, Grover Cleveland, then governor of New York, signed a bill making Niagara the first state park in the United States. Factories were cleared from the site, and within a few years, Canada had also established a park on its side of the falls. This was among the first efforts at conservation in America. And Sanford Robinson Gifford. Following his service in the Civil War, Gifford returned to New York and painted Hunter Mountain Twilight. Not a painting of pristine wilderness, but of the devastation of the forest by clear cutting. James Pinchot, a lumber baron responsible for the clear cutting, bought the painting and was so moved by it that he named his son Gifford Pinchot. Gifford Pinchot would grow to become the first head of the U.S. Forest Service and a conservationist who was the East Coast equivalent of John Muir in the West. Those are several of our main characters. They and others all contributed to defining a new way of portraying the wilderness, the sublime. Now, Robert will pick up with some Ice Age geology and its art.
Oops, wrong way. There we go. Now, this is a picture of North Lake. And if you have not yet been to North Lake, you've got to put it on your list, your bucket list. It's a place that you must go. If you have been to North Lake, you know why I'm making this recommendation. When you get there, go to the eastern shore of North Lake and find this outcrop. It's just a little bit north of the swim beach. And when you get there, you will see bedrock. And if you look carefully, you'll see that there are things there that need explanation. Right here, the bedrock has been polished to a smooth, very flat surface. Looks like the top of a billiard table. Behind that are scratches, all oriented in the same direction. Something has happened to these rocks. What could it be? What could it be? Well, they've been scoured by the passage of a glacier. About 14,000 years ago, coming from behind, from the east, a glacier rose up the wall of Manitou, the Catskill front, came across the crest of the mountain, carrying an enormous amount of sand and cobbles and boulders with it. It scoured across this surface. The sand polished the rock, and the cobbles and the boulders dragged scratches into the rock. Now, if you've never seen such a thing, it's something we hope that you'll learn from our talk tonight, and that when you get out hiking again come spring, you'll take notice of bedrock and you'll look to see if you can find things of this sort. Now, we're talking about the scouring effect of a glacier, and I want to take you just a little bit south of the city of Hudson. If you've been to Olana, then Olana is right there. This is Church Hill, and this is Mount Merino. If you've been to Church Hill, oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back. Oh, no. There we go. If you've been to Church Hill, you've looked south from the south porch and you've seen a wonderful view. But look at Mount Merino a little bit to the north. Look at the crest that runs down the center of the mountain and the steep slopes on the east and on the west. Notice that the slope in the north is relatively steep and that the mountain is stretched out towards the southwest. It's got shape. It's been sculpted. It's been molded. And I don't think it's going to take too much for me to convince you that what happened there during the last ice age is that a very substantial glacier came from the northeast down the Hudson Valley and scoured the shape that you're looking at. This is something called a rock drumlin. And it's a landscape feature, which once you know what to look for is real easy to spot. But if you don't know what to look for, it's something you would drive by, walk by, bicycle by, and never even notice. Now, the south-facing slope is something you can see from the south porch of Olana. And during his lifetime, especially in the winter, when he couldn't go anywhere else, Fredrick Church would sketch looking south from his palace, from his mansion. This is the view that he would see on this date in January of maybe 1865 or something like that. In the distance is Imbrock Bay, the Hudson River. It's down right about there. And this is the Hudson River. And this is a landscape which is part of the Church Hill rock drumlin. It's a landscape that was sculpted by the passage of the ice, by the passage of the glacier. Now, a little bit more technical science of geology. We want you to imagine that coming from the right, which is the east, is a massive glacier. It encounters a bedrock knob, a big one. This could be 1,000 feet tall, maybe even 2,000 feet tall. The glacier, as it's moving to the south, is going to scour its way up the north-facing slope. And due to that slope, what the glacier did at North Lake, polish it, smooth it out, scour it. But when the glacier gets past the top of the mountain, of the knob, whatever you want to call it, it has a very different effect upon that bedrock. The ice actually sticks to the bedrock, adheres to the bedrock. The glacier keeps moving to the south, but at the same time, because it's sticking to the bedrock, it's yanking on that bedrock, and it plucks massive amounts of rock out of the south-facing slope of the hill. The two slopes turn out looking quite a bit different, one from the other. One is scoured into a gentle slope. The other is plucked into something approaching a cliff. And there's an awfully good example of a scour and pluck landscape. You're looking at the town of Middleburg in the Schoharie Creek Valley, and that hill is called Roman's Nose. The glacier came from the right. The glacier scoured its way up the right side of the hill and yanked rock out of the hill and dragged it off to create the cliff on the south slope of the mountain. Okay, Johanna's going to pick that up from here and get us back to art.
Thomas Cole created a 5-part allegory in paint about the foolishness of man, entitled The Course of Empire. Within it, in the background of all 5 paintings, is the one unchanging feature, a mountain. From reading and learning about Thomas Cole, we understand that he had some knowledge of geology and geologic time. He spent time with George Fanshawe, the first United States geologist, and also with Benjamin Silliman, a renowned geology professor at Yale. So we think he included the unchanging mountain as a symbol to represent how insignificant the folly of man was in the course of geologic time. We see the unchanging mountain in the savage state, the pastoral state, the consummation of empire, destruction, and finally, desolation. Ever since these paintings were created, people have wondered if this mountain existed and where it was. We think we found the answer. During his first trip to the Catskills in 1824-25, Cole was invited to stay at the home of George Fanshawe in the town of Esperance. The overland route to Esperance from the boat dock at Catskill would have taken Cole through the town of Middleburg and directly past this, Roman's Nose. We believe it was this mountain that he included in his paintings, but there has never been, as far as we know, an erratic at the top of Roman's Nose. But we do know that around the time he was painting the series, there was quite a bit of controversy about the source of erratics. We know today erratics are boulders that were carried by the ice and left randomly on the landscape by the melting of glaciers. Robert will pick up with some more Ice Age features.
Let's get back to this picture at North Lake. I hope you like it because you're going to be seeing it a couple of times tonight. Look, what is important here now is not so much the scoured part, but the striations. These are called glacial striations. A boulder or a cobble pressed by the weight of the ice above it and pushed from behind towards the west in the direction that we're looking was dragged across that surface and left that long, straight striation. It has a compass direction. What you're looking at is a bunch of striations, which are almost all of them oriented east to west. Out here in the distance is the west. And what a marvelous thing that is. We're scientists. We like to collect data. And we have spent so much time in the North Lake vicinity, walking around all the trails, carrying a compass with us and a notebook and a pen, and measuring the compass directions of the striations and writing those compass directions down in a notebook. It is data collection. Why on earth do we do this? Are we just dumb? No, because when you spend a lot of time in an area and you collect a very large number of compass directions, you begin to pick up patterns. These arrows represent the flow of the ice during the Ice Age when the North Lake vicinity was glaciated. I mean, you may never have been up there. I hope you have, but this is Kaaterskill Clove right here. This is where Kaaterskill Falls is. This is North Lake. This is South Lake. And this is the edge of the Catskill Front, also known as the Wall of Manitou. The arrows record the behavior of the ice during the Ice Age, during the time when this area, North Lake, was sculpted by the passage of the ice. Let's start out with a big arrow on the far east here. It is the Hudson Valley Glacier grinding its way past the Wall of Manitou and sculpting that Wall of Manitou. The Catskill Front, the Wall of Manitou, is as straight as an arrow, 10-mile long stretch, cliff almost. It drops about 1,500 feet from the top to the valley floor, and it is an outstanding landscape feature. You might be puzzled to look at this satellite shot and to wonder, how could it possibly be that a feature as straight as this could ever come into existence? The answer is that the glaciers did it. This produces some very fine landscape. Here we are back at Alana, looking at the Hudson Valley, and out there in the distance is the Wall of Manitou, the straight as an arrow 10-mile cliff at the edge, eastern edge of the Catskill Mountains. And there is a painting that Fredrick Church did, in the late 1860s, I believe, focused on the Wall of Manitou. That gets us back to my wife.
And here are some more paintings of different aspects of the Wall of Manitou, the Catskill Front. This one from Thomas Cole, called The Four Elements, from 1843, 1844. And you can see this is South Mountain and the Wall of Manitou in front of it. The glacier actually shaved part of this mountain off. And Fredrick Church. This is called Above the Clouds at Sunrise, from 1848. The problem with painting from the top of the Wall of Manitou is that there is this overwhelming, sweeping 70-mile horizon. It's too wide, even for a large canvas. So Fredrick Church solved the problem by hiding the view in the morning clouds that commonly fill the valley. The viewer is left to imagine the real view. Now Robert's going to take us to Kaaterskill Clove to see its Ice Age history.
Now we're back to this map. It's an important map. It is a very, very important map. I want you to focus on it a little bit. North Lake, South Mountain, the Hudson Valley and Kaaterskill Clove. Folks, this is the vicinity where the Hudson River School of Art was given birth. This is where it was invented. This, if you like, we might say, was where it was discovered. You can spend all night long worrying about whether invented or discovered are the right words. But we get back to that pattern, the flow of the ice. And right now, we've just done creation of the Wall of Manitou. Now what we want to do is see what happened when the ice got to Kaaterskill Clove. It turned west and it began moving up the clove in this direction. If you've ever been on the rim trail, then you know here and there are beautiful ledges of rock that the trail crosses. You stand there and you gaze into the valley below, and you look west and you look east, and you are awed by this iconic image from the Catskills. But we stop, we get down, we look at the bedrock, and we begin to see things that are important. This is Sunset Rock. There are two Sunset Rocks in that North Lake. This is the one that overlooks Kaaterskill Clove. In the distance, you see Haynes Falls. Below you, you see the clove itself. But look at the bedrock for a minute. You've learned enough about bedrock tonight to maybe recognize what we're looking at. This surface has been scoured by the passage of the ice. This surface here, vertical, has been plucked. A glacier came up Kaaterskill Clove, passed across this ledge of rock, scoured it, and plucked it. There's hardly a geologist in any part of North America that wouldn't look at that ledge and instantly understand what the glaciers had done here. That geologist may very well, however, not know what the artist did here. Let's go right to here, because right there in the 1860s, Sanford Robinson Gifford sat or stood with a sketch pad in his lap, and he gazed in this direction and put together this absolutely magnificent painting. This is the same ledge of rock. The man is standing on the scoured surface. This is the plucked mass of rock that was dragged off by the glacier moving from your left to your right. This is entitled A Ledge on South Mountain, Sanford Robinson Gifford, 61 to 62. It's such a beautiful painting. We've seen it. It was on display at Cedar Grove, about 10 years ago, I think, something like that. Everybody on the planet Earth can stand in front of this painting and admire the beauty of the art. But only a geologist or several geologists like Johanna and I can look at it and instantly see the Ice Age history that is here. This a little bit to the west is Inspiration Point, and it's the same thing. There is the scoured surface, and here is the plucked surface. A glacier moved from the left to the right, yanked rock out of the ground, the rock that used to be right here, and created this landscape feature, which in the early 1860s, Sanford Robinson Gifford came and found and painted a painting that he called Craig in the Catskills. Once again, I say the same thing. Anybody can appreciate the landscape beauty of that, but not everybody can understand the geological background that we see right here. Well, let's get back to this. To this map showing what the glaciers are going to continue to do. They're going to turn north now, enter the Kaaterskill Falls area, and they're going to enter the North-South Lake area. The glacier will come from the southwest, another mass of ice will come from the east, and they're actually going to collide close, we think, to the boundary between North and South Lake. And there we go again. There we get back again to this view of North Lake. And this story that this same picture tells this time is that the glacier that came from the east entered the park, scoured the bedrock that we see here, and then went on to dig out, to scour out the basin that today we call North Lake. If you could take scuba gear and go out here in the lake and find more outcrops at the bottom of the lake, you would find that they too were scoured and striated by the passage of the ice. Now, the same thing happened at South Lake, only in this case, the glacier came from the south, not from the east, from the south. I want you to look at this photograph, and I want you to see a glacier rising up on this distant shore, expanding as it approaches us, and like at North Lake, scouring out the basin, actually digging the basin that would become South Lake. North Lake and South Lake weren't always there. 15,000 years ago, they did not exist. But then 14,000 years ago, the glaciers came along and scoured out these basins. And in 1825, Thomas Cole came along and painted South Lake. And physically created so much of the scenery and the art that makes up this area of the Catskills. Now, this is one of Johanna's favorite views, and I'm going to give her the show back.
This is the view from a place called Sunset Rocks, the other Sunset Rock today, and it's a spot above North Lake. The glaciers created what was considered one of the finest views east of the Rocky Mountains. That's South Mountain, right over there, and North and South Lakes below. The view started attracting Hudson River School artists early on. It was spectacular, and they all heard about it. So this is the Catskill Mountain House, the big hotel that was built right on the edge of the wall of Manitou. And this one is by Jasper Cropsy. And then Catskill Mountain House again, same view from Sanford Robinson Gifford in 1862. Well, the advance of the glaciers, as we have seen, produced a host of landscapes that inspired and still inspire a lot of paintings. But the climate eventually changed. It warmed up. All that ice began melting, and all that meltwater glutted the local streams, and they eroded into even more scenic landscapes. This was a new phase of the Ice Age, and it brought on a new phase of landscape sculpting. And this, once again, is Kaaterskill Clove, a spot called Inspiration Point. And the clove is about 5 miles long, a mile across, and about 1,500 feet in depth. It's very picturesque, and it also attracted a lot of artists. And this is a little bit out of focus, I'm sorry. It's not such a great picture, but this is Kaaterskill Clove from a place called Poet's Ledge at the eastern end of the clove. And this was the target of one of our first serious hikes together in Kaaterskill Clove.
Real serious hike.
The view is perhaps the best in all of the clove, but a word of warning, the trail to it is absolutely straight up the mountain. And Twilight in the Catskills, view of Kaaterskill Clove by Sanford Robinson Gifford. And yes, it is that orange in person. And once again, kindred spirits, which is, if you look at it, you can almost take apart the pieces of Kaaterskill Clove and where they've been placed by Asher Brown Duran. So that's a condensed rendering of Kaaterskill's Clove. And I couldn't leave you without showing you something by a female artist of the Hudson River School. This is Kaaterskill Clove.
And there were several of them.
This is Kaaterskill Clove by Harriet Peale, who was Rembrandt Peale's wife and the daughter-in-law of Charles Wilson Peale, all three artists. And this is part of the Lower Canyon. And this is one of my favorite paintings because you can go there today and literally find each of those rocks right where they're supposed to be. And those boulders are, of course, glacial erratics. They were brought there by the ice advancing up the Clove. But there's another famous feature in Kaaterskill Clove, Kaaterskill Falls. And Robert's going to take us there.
Now, this is not Kaaterskill Falls, this is Niagara Falls. Niagara Falls must be one of the most visited waterfalls on the whole planet Earth. People have been going there for centuries. Those people include artists and photographers. And so we have a record of what the falls look like during the last several hundred years. In 1678, this was the edge of the falls. 1764, here was the edge of the falls. 1819, 1842, 2011. We have irrefutable evidence of what's called waterfall retreat. A waterfall erodes its way back upstream. And over the course of several centuries, people begin to notice that sort of thing. Now, I'd like you to look at this map of Kaaterskill Falls. The falls is right here. And having just heard what I said, I hope you'll look at this and say, wow, Kaaterskill Falls is the product of waterfall retreat. Post-Ice Age waterfall retreat. And in a sense, that means that Kaaterskill Falls, probably the single most picturesque feature in all of this area, is a product of the Ice Age. It attracted glaciers, it attracted artists, beginning not in 1925, but in 1825, when Thomas Cole visited the falls, painted the great ledges that make up the falls, put an Indian right there in the middle of the falls, and created an inspiring landscape painting. This in 1825, again, was one of the earliest known examples of the Hudson River School of Art, the product of the Ice Age. Sanford Robinson Gifford came along a quarter of a century later, and he painted the falls from a little higher up. Recently, and a few years ago, a viewing platform was built where you can go and see exactly this view as it is today. In the warm months, it is even, we think, wheelchair accessible. Okay. Sanford Robinson Gifford again. He was famed as being one of the originators of a type of painting that's called luminism. And if you look at this painting, the definition of the word luminism is right before you. It's playing and capturing the effects of sunlight on a landscape. It plays with shadows, it plays with sunlight, it plays with color, and creates an image, creates a painting. This is Upper and Lower Kaaterskill Falls, not very accurately rendered, but beautifully painted. On a day which wasn't quite as pretty, Fredrick Church came along. In the winter, right now, if you were to go to Kaaterskill Falls tomorrow, you would see a great cone of ice and a mass of icicles dangling off the edge of the falls. That is the art that Fredrick Church chose to present. Now, the Alps. What is this guy Titus talking about? The Catskills are not the Alps. The Alps are in Switzerland, and the Alps are places where you have alpine glaciers. There's an alpine glacier, and descending from the top of the glacier is the rest of the ice. Here's another alpine glacier, and descending from it is another mass of ice. We have two glaciers from two alpine glaciers. That couldn't possibly have happened in the Catskills, could it? Our mountains are not the Alps. Our mountains don't look like the Alps, so they don't today. That's true, but they did in the past. If you go hiking at Hunter Mountain, you'll end up at the fire tower at the top. And if you do enjoy the privilege of doing this, we want you to notice that there are cloves rising up the mountain from all different directions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these cloves. And I took it and drew this picture illustrating the 10 glaciers that once descended from this mountain. You can see them from the highway below. I'm looking up at a glacier and another glacier way up there. Let's give it back to Johanna. This is the same mountain.
At the very end of the Ice Age, glaciers were vacating the Hudson Valley. Their melting left behind a very large lake, much like today's Lake Champlain. It was called Glacial Lake Albany. The lake accumulated many, many, many layers of sediments, most of which are still there. They created the flat valley floor landscape. This is what some of those landscapes look like along the New York Thruway today. Just areas of flat. That's all you see, but they are the bottoms of glacial lakes. And this one in Dover Plains, New York, in Dutchess County, from Asher Brown Durand in 1848. And this is also a lake bottom that he painted.
Well, we're almost done, but you don't get out of here without hearing an advertisement. Johanna and I are currently working on a book, and the focus of the book will be what you heard tonight. And so there's no reason you should buy it and read it when it comes out, but we would hope that you do. We'll have time in our book to cover more material than we have tonight. Oh, golly, this will probably be a year, maybe even more than that from now. But we hope that you'll be alert for the coming of this book. Check our Facebook page from time to time.
And we're going to take you back to that favorite spot of ours, the view from the south porch of Olana, Fredrick Church's home near Hudson. And on any given day in the summer, you might actually find us there picnicking. But we hope that from this day on, that you'll be inspired to join us in acknowledging that our part of the world is a gift of the Ice Age. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
And we'll be glad to answer questions.
We'll try.
Thank you both. That was fascinating. I haven't heard a talk like that probably ever. That was just such a fascinating intersection of two fields that we often consider as separate. So we do have a handful of questions in the Q&A, and I certainly welcome more people to chime in there. You can type your questions into the Q&A. You can also put them into the chat, and I'll find them there as well. So let's see. We have a handful. We have a question from William Schlesinger, who was the former Cary president. So we might as well start with that one. So he asks, he says, Jacob Caleb Ward was a well-known painter in the Hudson River School. Did he paint any glacial landscapes?
I'm not very familiar with that artist. Johanna is Googling it right now. So, so maybe she can fake it with an answer. I'm so sorry. I cannot answer that question right now.
No problem. We can also, I can hop to another one, and then we can see if you surface any other thoughts there. Let's see. We have a question. Was it more common for striations to be carved during advancement or recession of the glacier, and why?
Okay, I want to clear up a misconception. Glaciers do not move backwards. If you retreat, you turn around and you run off in some distant direction. A glacier can melt backwards, but it cannot move backwards. A glacier can move forward because it's being pushed by ice that extends all the way back to Labrador. Snow in Labrador turns to ice. That ice spreads to the south and drives other ice ahead of it. It advances across the landscape, polishes, scours, and striates that landscape. But there's no such thing as a striation from a retreating or melting glacier.
Great.
Got one.
We had a few questions that folks asked when they registered for the webinar, and then I can see some more coming in just now that are about how aware or knowledgeable the Hudson River School artists were about geology. And you spoke about that a little bit, but maybe you could get more into that about sort of their background in geology and if they were intentionally trying to capture that in their art. And this specific question sort of about their conception of deep geological time and the action of the glaciers in their art.
The Hudson River School painters were painting at a place in time when a lot of science was changing. A lot of people were making new discoveries about science. I can give you one little short story about Fredrick Church. Fredrick Church went up to Newfoundland to paint icebergs. And on his way, he just happened to get on a boat to go up to Boston. And on the boat with him was Louis Agassiz. Louis Agassiz was a famous scientist from Switzerland. And he had been in the United States lecturing people for the first time about his theory of the Ice Age and where erratics came from and how erratics got where they were. Up until that time, the only explanation for glacial erratics was that they were dumped in place by Noah's flood. And so this was a whole big new controversial theory. And we know that the two of them met on this boat and they had a conversation. And I can't imagine the conversation being about anything else other than the Ice Age. But the person that was reporting about their meeting was so seasick on the voyage that he never attended the meeting or the conversation, never heard the conversation. So we get little glimpses. Thomas Cole hiked extensively with Benjamin Silliman, who was the leading geologist in the country, professor of Yale back then. So I can't imagine also them not having conversations about how the landscapes were formed and what processes formed them. Fredrick Church in his library at Ohlona has several books from geologists and scientists of the time. So we know that they had some knowledge, whether or not they believed it, whether or not they thought that they were painting something that had to do with something scientific is not for us to say. They've never written about it per se, but we think that they certainly had some knowledge.
We think they tried to have some knowledge. I think they were interested in.
Fredrick Church especially.
Very interesting. Maybe an open question. There's another interesting question, which may connect back to your book or maybe even other books that you've written. The question is there a bibliography available that catalogs all of these paintings that you referred to in the lecture? And this person says they'd love to visit some of the sites in person with that catalog of the paintings in hand so they could kind of have that back and forth experience like we did in this presentation.
There is a pamphlet, more than a book, I would say, that's called the Hudson River Art Trail. And it's available at Cedar Grove at Thomas Cole National Historic Site, and they put it together. And there are some markers even on the trails to make you stop and say, okay, this is where this painting was painted from. This is the view that was included in that painting. But, you know, again, there are very few of them. And we could literally take you to probably most anywhere that any of the paintings were painted.
Our book will have, probably 100 locations in it and directions on how to get to them and what you're going to see when you get there, and run out and buy it.
I think some folks certainly will. That's a brilliant idea, something that you can take with you in the field, so you can be in that moment, in that place, and think about that history.
Yeah, all of our books do that, by the way.
We make them small enough to fit into a glove compartment.
Very smart. All right, here is a question. I've read that the Hudson River followed a different course thousands of years ago and turned to the west somewhere north of Bear Mountain. Can you speak about this theory?
No.
Turn to the west.
Couldn't. To the left, she said.
Rivers change course over time. All rivers do. So it's not something that's really surprising, but
not the way it was described by you a moment ago. No such change of that sort.
No, it didn't suddenly turn direction.
It flowed north to south, and it probably always has flowed north to south. I think we're 4 for 5 now.
We could jump from this theory to a rumor that was shared with us. And we talked about this earlier. So let me see if I can pull up this question, which is based off of a rumor.
No, we're scientists.
Yes, from theory to rumor. I seem to, this is a pre-webinar question. The respondent says, I seem to recall hearing that Fredrick Church used dynamite to sculpt a more perfect mountain view from his residence at Olana. Is this merely a rumor? If not, have you visited the area where the explosions took place, and is it obvious to the eye of the geologist?
We came to the conclusion, if you drive into Olana, almost as you start onto the drive, there is an area off to your right that is a quarry. And we know that stone was quarried there to produce the roadbed that leads up and down from Olana. Whether or not he used dynamite to blow apart that rock, you got us. But did he do that in order to change the landscape? No.
And certainly not to improve the view. No. Certainly didn't do that.
What you see was already there when he got there, basically.
Wonderful. All right, from theory to rumor, and now here is a question about fossil shells. How is it possible that there are fossil shells along the escarpment trail? Oops, it just jumped on me. Were they brought there, or was it the bottom of the sea?
The escarpment trail is at the top of the Catskill sequence, and mostly sandstones, and they were deposited in a terrestrial environment by rivers and in swamps and landscape basins. There should be no fossil shells up there native to that rock. The glaciers, however, might have brought rock from the lower Hudson Valley all the way to the top, and some of those rocks might have fossil shells in them. So the best answer I can give you is there are very few fossils way up there. If there are any, they almost certainly were brought there by the glaciers.
Great. All right. This, I think, will be our last question of the evening, and then we'll wrap things up. So this is Robert Wills writes, thank you. Just amazing. Your book has influenced me and my son, the RPI geologist. And the question is, the Hudson River School was partly in response to the Industrial Revolution. Who is the artist today that will enlighten us about our precarious position in life and the world today?
Oh, boy.
You do this one.
I can't think of any one person that stands out like Thomas Cole stood out at the beginning of the Hudson River School of Art. But I'm sure that somebody will come to the surface and lead the movement, and it certainly has begun already.
Thomas Cole very much bemoaned the industrialization of America when they ran a railroad line right through the village of Catskill. He was desolate from a place where he had painted. They ran a railroad line right through it, and he painted it again, had to put the damn railroad in it, and he just hated it. He had very strong passions about the preservation of a natural landscape.
We often talk about the paintings where the Hudson River is seen, and the fact that there is no industry in those paintings. And we know that there were ice houses and brick industries and things like that, and tanneries, and it must have been horrible and polluting. But the painters that were painting decided to paint that stuff out. And I think it was just to encourage people to come and see the beauty of the place instead of the industry.
That's great. Thank you. And there really is not an easy answer for that question, but it is a great question to sort of think about, where are we today and how do these paintings and these special places influence us today? And I'm sure in a lot of ways we've moved from an era of sort of a single iconic person like Fredrick Church or Thomas Cole to hopefully a much more collective and collaborative approach where everyone has that voice and can really weigh in and be that influence. So maybe that is part of why it would be so hard to say who is the artist or the scientist.
Yeah, like
Hopefully
I said, there really is a whole movement going on.
Yeah. Well, we're just nearing 8 o'clock here. There are a lot more questions in the chat, so I really encourage folks to reach out to the Tituses, reach out to us at Carey and the Catskill Science Collaborative. We would love to keep this conversation going. And I think we all can look forward to a great new book to accompany us on some beautiful hikes very soon. And I want to also echo, there were a lot of appreciations and thank yous in the chat to both of you, Robert and Johanna. So I want to echo that both from the Carey Institute and the Catskill Science Collaborative. This was really a fascinating evening, and we thank you both for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you. And if you'd like, you can put our email address in the chat. And if people who have questions that we haven't answered can certainly email us, and we'll try and answer them for them.
Fantastic. Thank you both. And thank you everyone for attending and joining us for the evening.
Yes, thank you.
And thanks to Michelle, especially. I don't know what that means.
Thank you. Love you. Have a good night.
Wonderful. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.